Entrepreneurship can be really hard, and when you're doing it by yourself, trying to navigate the terrain, it can almost be impossible. That's why we created the Entrepreneur Circle. Every episode, you're going to hear from incredible entrepreneurs who are in the same trenches that you are in. And we're going to talk through what's working, what's not working, whether it be in marketing, finance, or anything in between. We're here to talk business and figure out how each of us can rise together. So welcome to the circle. Let's dig in. First of all, thank you. Again, I can't thank you enough. Seriously.
You're very welcome.
I recognize how hard it is to probably think back and, do the play-by-play of how everything unfolded at Columbine. But tell me what that day was like for you. You woke up, regular day, you went to school, and what happened?
So regular day for us, my parents' house lived right down the street, so I walked to school. My grandparents actually were visiting from Michigan, so a little bit different than just normal, but that day went to school, just left the classroom downstairs by the cafeteria, Dave Sanders' room, climbed up the stairs that go upstairs, and went into our science area. And each section of the school is built on U's. So U shaped, so science is U, English is U shaped. So where my classroom was, I could actually see down to my parents' neighborhood. Within about 5 minutes of being in the classroom, all of a sudden a loud bomb went off, kind of sound, and the fire alarms went off. So not knowing what was going on or anything from that, everyone was kind of like, Mr. Friesen must have blown up the chemistry lab again. And so at that point, our teacher, it's a fire drill. So they shoved us out in the hallway, locked the door, and another teacher, Mosier, did the same thing. And so we have two classes out in the hallway, not knowing what's truly going on. So when the bombs went truly off, or I shouldn't say bomb, but the loud booms in the building, we heard a lot of kids screaming down the hallway, just running down. And we were like, okay, something's off, and then not knowing. So
I think the crazy thing about Columbine is that it was the first one. And it was like a rip in the universe. After that, it has become more and more frequent, unfortunately. And it's such a terrible thing to look at from a parent lens. I mean, that's where I'm at today and why SOS was born. It was out of, okay, my kids are growing up, they're going into the school system, and this is happening more and more often. Columbine was the very first one, so I could imagine the teachers, the students, the faculty, everyone was very much caught off guard by what was happening. What happened after that? Did you guys all run outside?
No. So for us, once we got shoved out in the hallway, we heard several shots. And when you look down the main corridor, you could actually see sandals, like shoes that were from kids running in the hallway. And these are all the kids that came from downstairs, trying to escape what was going on. At that time, we heard the gunshots kind of through the hallway, and our teacher was scrambling to unlock the door. We had our classroom, Mr. Mosier next to us, and then right next to our classroom was the adjunct room for a couple teachers. So my teacher went in there, Mosier went in our room with his class and part of our class. I was locked in our room for about 5.5 hours.
So you guys went back into your classroom?
We went back into our classroom, and we hid along the outside wall of the school, where the student parking lot was.
And was it immediately when you heard people screaming and running down the hallway that your teacher had everybody go back into the classroom?
It was once we heard the gunshots.
Thanks to your teacher for keeping you guys safe.
I appreciate him. I mean, we had, my teacher was in his adjunct room, Mr. Mosier was in our room, kind of sitting because the rooms connected in the backside of the classrooms, and he sat in the doorway from his room in our class to kind of just make sure, no one could come through. But they did know we were there.
Wow. I admire you for talking about this because it honestly, just hearing it's hard to hear, and it's hard to imagine the feelings and the emotions that you had as a freshman going through that.
You don't know. I mean, we didn't know truly until the day when we were leaving the school, 5.5 hours later, when we're getting shipped in a bus to another school. We didn't really know what was going on. I can vividly, to this day, I remember the bullet coming through the doorway or through the wall next to us because they came around and shot right at our room. I remember when the SWAT vehicle, which was the armored truck, came through the student parking lot. I can see all that. I can remember the helicopters, everything.
You brought your yearbooks, and in previous conversations we've talked about the people that you knew who passed away or who were in the library. We talk about your teacher who passed away. I think looking at the situation, how have you coped with it? How have you been able to grow past that level of trauma and fear, especially now that you're a parent? How have you addressed this for yourself to get through it?
It's hard. I thank my brother from at the beginning. He kind of, the days afterwards had me help go move his business, whatnot. And I would say somewhat traumatizing, but somewhat not, as he's dropping things in the back of a U-Haul. That sounds the very same sound of what was going on in the building. But for me, it's been talking about it. It's not hiding. It's part of my life. I've lost friends since then from suicide and whatnot, but I think the biggest thing, Paresa, is talking about it. As you started the conversation, it brought chills to me. And I can't hide from it. I was there. I was a freshman.
So how does this show up for you today with you have a beautiful family, you have 2 boys. That's how we met. Our boys go to school together.
That they do.
And, I shared a little bit about how I feel about it, and I haven't been through what you've gone through, right? And I pray that our community doesn't have to deal with anything like this. Pray that nobody has to deal with anything like this. I pray that Schilder Schools has to shut down because this doesn't happen anymore. It would
be amazing, but what the reality is out there.
The reality is that it's just happening more and more frequently. And, I remember when the Uvalde school shooting happened at an elementary school and looking at the actual details of how so many of these situations have unfolded. Columbine was just, again, it was its own animal. They were doing wild stuff at Columbine. And there's a lot that, you have to address on the mental health issue, on the softer sides of this conversation. But there's also probably 50% of school shootings that are happening because there is a gap in security. Like Uvalde, it was a broken lock on the door, and that's how the shooter got into the school. And you look at the Covenant, they shot through the window. You look at the shooting in Minneapolis, most recently, they shot through the window. So this is happening more and more. And when you look at the situation from, an outside perspective, there's things that can be done. I think the conversation always goes to the Second Amendment, and it's a good conversation to have, 100%. It's going to always be a conversation of tension. It's going to always be a tug of war. Even if we get some movement, there's always going to be something that pushes back in that conversation. So then let's zoom out of that conversation because this is bigger than politics.
100%. You nailed it. We know each other well. You know my kids, I know your kids. And, I look at my 2 who are 6 and 7, and them going to school is, every day I drop them off, and it's, I love you guys, no matter what happens today. I love you. I let them know that. I can't imagine what I would go through personally. I've seen what my parents went through. To possibly lose a child to someone's negligence, to someone who's mentally not stable. And I think you nailed it. You can go to gun control, you can go to any different levels. And I don't think gun control is truly the answer. You can take guns away all day long, but that's not going to do it. Someone still, if they want to do it, they're going to find a way. And I think that's where we have to get down to what is the mental health of people, the society. Like you and I've talked, before of, as a parent, where are we in our kids' lives? God trusted you to bring a child in. And with that, you need to, help raise that child correctly.
I love that. I think that's one of the biggest things that you've brought to light in our conversations is the other sides of this. Like our focus for SOS has been the locks and the security upgrades, but it's how involved are the parents? How are they securing their guns? That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is the mental health. Like, are these kids getting the support that they need? And then on the other side of it is this stuff has happened so much. Are the kids who have been victims or know like who have been at these schools during a situation like this, how are they coping after the fact? There's so much to talk about on this topic.
It's true. I mean, I have a good friend that lives not far from me, and her and I, it was interesting. She went through a nasty divorce a couple of years ago, and mentally she, sat down with a therapist, and it tied all the way back to Columbine. And, we're in our 40s now. As a freshman, there's so much to unravel still.
Yeah. What do you think, you know a lot about charter schools and what our whole goal is. How do you think that is playing a role in these circumstances?
To me, SOS has the opportunity to bring things in that as a society we look at taxes all the time. How do we cut more out? How do we not, give more to the county? Well, that's great in some ways and not great in other ways. And in the ways of schools, I don't think that's a perfect area. I think SOS being another front, another source, another area that you guys are going in, you're looking at the school needs and helping try to provide that. And I think, like you were saying, there's more than just a small piece. There is unraveling of how much SOS can go after. And I think if people truly look at what you guys are doing, I don't see why they wouldn't want to be part of it.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That. And I appreciate you being open to sharing your story about this. Again, I sound like a broken record player.
No, it's okay. I think that the more that know about, if it's my story or another story or, what the case is, I think the better we can help. Like I said, it's not gun control. It's not just one piece. It's everything. And, you guys are doing amazing things already. And I think, like I've told you before, the sky limit is open.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being willing to support us getting to that level of impact. That's the whole goal is
most definitely.
How many schools can we help? How many students, teachers can we protect? Can we talk about your teacher? What was his name?
So the one who got killed, Dave Sanders? Yes.
Dave Sanders. So tell me about Dave Sanders first before getting into the story.
Yeah. So Dave was an amazing teacher. The class that I had him with was for typing. So, we'd go in there and, we'd sit there and pack, try to type as much and how fast can we type and whatnot. But he was always a guy that could come to you if you're struggling. He would always put his hand on your shoulder, as he's, hey, how are you doing? Where are you at? But he was also a coach as well. And he was very much part of the school. He was an amazing teacher.
He sounds amazing. And he was one of the victims.
Yes.
Do you know his story? Did they come to his classroom?
No. So when I left, right before the school shooting happened, I was actually in Dave Sanders' classroom. I was in typing class. I walked out, like I said, went up the stairs and went out. Dave Sanders was a heroic man. I mean, he confronted him. He tried to protect. He tried to be a roadblock for the kids. So he's a great man. I mean, I only knew him from, being a freshman. Unfortunately, you don't know much of the teachers, but I knew of that. And, a piece of him, carried through the rest of the years I was there at school.
You had a very interesting experience down the line.
I did. My senior year, I was in the classroom that he died in. I was actually in the classroom, the same teacher that was there. And I was struggling to even pass the class. I was struggling emotionally, just spiritually, not working well with anything. And I remember on a test one day that I literally felt the same hand that Dave Sanders would put on my shoulder. And I remember that, and I just remember calming down and breathing and actually passing the test.
Wow. I have goosebumps all over. I've literally heard that story 3 times. You've told me 3 times, and every time I get goosebumps everywhere.
It's, to me, if people don't believe in spirituals or whatnot, I do. I believe, there's something there. So.
Yeah, I believe it too. What would you say to students who have gone through this?
I think the biggest thing for students that have gone through it is talking about it. Anyone, everyone, mental health-wise, we shut down as a human, as a society. We shut down because when you talk about it, sometimes people feel that, oh, well, I don't know how to handle you. It's that delicate flower kind of a thing or a delicate piece. And instead, talking about and being open about it has helped me, and I encourage others to do the same thing. And if you can't, go seek help. Go talk to someone. Find that source of avenue and not hold it in.
Not hold it in. I imagine holding it in would turn into something down the line. I mean, this is such big stuff that we're talking about, such heavy stuff that as a parent, as a student, as a teacher, no matter who you are, even law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is a whole nother piece that we expect our police officers and first responders to just handle the trauma because that's part of their job. But the level of stuff that they see, it is a lot. And I think back to our gala, we had one of the first responders to STEM, to Deer Creek, etc. He was speaking and he was giving the first count of what he saw when he showed up on scene, and it's horrific. I mean, it's like it's so much that I would imagine that they have a lot of mental health support, but if there is anybody who hears this who is holding it in and hasn't talked about it, whether it be something like this or otherwise, it's important. I agree with you fully.
Most definitely. I mean, Columbine, like you said, I don't want to say it set the mark, but it did. The U.S., it started. I mean, you look at Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, you look at that was Littleton Fire at the time, which is now Southwest Metro. It's showing up to something like that. How do you gear yourself? And I think since then, I know a lot of law enforcement, Douglas County, a lot of them have really going, how do we handle this? How do we do it? It's okay. Do we rush in? Do we not rush in? If we rush in, could there be more damage or not? But not knowing and not doing isn't going to do anything either.
100%. What would you say to parents who want to have some impact on what's happening? I feel like, initially before SOS, I felt super helpless and just like, okay, this is how it is. We just are going to deal with it.
I think as a parent, I know for me personally, I've gotten engaged in the school. As a father, I take time out of my schedule, my day, and I go walk the school. I became part of the school, their watchdog program. And really, to me, okay, if it's something that small, and we're all taking a turn, we're all doing something like that, that helps. That's just a piece. But I think watching our kids, learning who our kids are, and being truly a parent, there's signs and symptoms for anyone. If it's a kid shooter, if it's another adult shooter, there are signs and symptoms. But I think getting involved.
I agree. Getting involved. Get involved in PTO, get involved at your school, get involved with Shield Our Schools. There's a lot of foundations out there that are doing similar work and attacking the problem from a different angle. We're not helpless as parents. I mean, It's not just here's what it is. I feel like this often feels so out of our control. We just send our kids and hope for the best. But it really is when parents get involved and the community is closer, you can recognize those things. You can recognize the signs and symptoms.
I mean, I know from, my past history being a firefighter, it's like as an EMT, what's the signs and symptoms of a heart attack? All those little pieces, if you take that as a parent or as a grandparent or as an aunt, an uncle, whoever you are, I think watching how either a child is acting, a loved one is acting, it could be a neighbor's acting. There's going to be. I mean, you listen to the news in terms of any of these other shootings and they go, oh yeah, well, that person was on the list. They were being watched. Well, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't we do it sooner? Well, why not? There's a reason. And every time they come up with a reason, to me personally, I call it, I'm going to say it, BS. You let it happen. So I think, to me, getting involved no matter what in life.
Yeah, lean in. Lean into the uncomfortable things.
Right.
It's interesting how good comes out of leaning into that. Often we avoid it because we don't want to think about it or talk.
No one likes uncomfortableness.
Exactly. Is there anything else that you want to share about your experience, about SOS, about family perspective?
When I heard what you guys were doing, when you reached out to me after the Evergreen shooting this year, I posted that. I know what they're going through. I know what the kids are going through. I don't know as a parent. Haven't known as a parent. Don't want to know as a parent. But I think it's what you guys are doing, more people need to be part of. More people need to raise their hand and say, what does it take? How can I help? If that's from a simple donation, if that's from, making a simple gesture, even if that's, hey, you know what? I can be part of my son's school, my grandkids' school, whatever it is. I think that's what needs to happen. But what you guys are going, like I said, the sky is the limit. You guys are doing major things that, we've talked about many times of it may not just be a simple camera. It may not be just a door lock. It may not just be, there's more to it. There really is. I think once those pieces keep finding out, and it's going to keep growing.
I appreciate that. I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg with what we're doing. We're like about 3 years in this year. And it's such a complex issue. And I think sitting down with you, it opened up my eyes to all the different avenues that SOS really can lean in to support in. I think it just comes down to, quite frankly, good and evil. And I'll go there. If we just sit back and let it happen, then it's going to continue. But if good takes action and good steps in to try to make a change in what's happening, I believe good will always win. I believe that wholeheartedly.
That's what, that's what God wants. God wants good to prevail, not the devil to win. And Amen. So I think if we all follow in what Jesus is saying, and we all believe in that, we can shut out the evil that's out there. I mean, today I see more evil than I've seen in decades. So getting involved, be part of something. Stand up for what you see. As a parent, learn your child. I mean, I look at my 7-year-old who's struggling, and, I see the emotions in him, and you go, okay, I don't want him to ever be a victim. I don't want him to be ever something that he turned wrong on, where I could have prevented that.
You started with going from one classroom to the next and what happened right when you heard the shots. Give us the play-by-play of how it unfolded across the board.
So, like I was saying, I walked up from one classroom to the science classroom, and it was within about 5 minutes of being in the classroom. A loud bang went off. Okay, we heard kids screaming down the hallway, and it was kind of like, it was kind of funny at first. It was like, Mr. Friesen must have blown up the chemistry lab, or it's because we're April, okay, we're coming close to the end of the year, seniors are doing their pranks. And once we kind of realized we heard more things happening, it was real. It was not, a chemistry lab. It wasn't the seniors pulling the prank. At that point, that's when, fire alarms are going off. We get shoved out in the hallway. And when you look down the main corridor, like I was saying before, you see sandals, you see shoes, and something wasn't right. And that's where we heard multiple more gunshots go off. We got shoved in, part of my class, another class got shoved into our classroom. Some were shoved into the faculty office, and that's where we kind of hid along the backside of the cabinets on the outside of the building. And a couple bullets came through the wall and went through to the outside wall. That's when we kind of really knew something was up. Of course, we had everyone screaming. The girls were screaming. It's trying to keep the room quiet because we don't know who was involved in the shooting at that point. And just trying to keep it quiet that way. No one knew we were truly there. I remember our classrooms, we had windows in it, and in the window had the wire in it, for safety and everything. I remember looking out the hallway. I remember for hours listening to the fire alarm just chirping, going off and whatnot. During the time we were in that classroom, you heard other parts going on in the school, more shooting, more bombs kind of going off. And when they go off, you would feel a little it was like a whoomp kind of in the room. You could feel kind of a little shake on that. Being that my parents' house was so close, sometimes we would try to, stand up, peek, look outside, what's going on. But I remember looking out the windows behind us, and you could see the news helicopters right there. You could see the SWAT vehicle coming in, where they were trying to get to the back of the school, where they pulled kids out, helping protect. It was a different piece that you never want to go through. Paresa, in my mind, I remember going, I need to get to the golf course, because I was working at the neighborhood golf course. I need to get down there, that's my job, I was 15 going on 16 in a month. And so during that time, we're sitting there. Did not know what's going on. Eventually it got quiet. The alarms are going off. There's no more, gunshots, no more bomb sounds going off. We start hearing a sound of, it sounds like doors shutting. Boom, 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 boom. And that's the SWAT team that was going through room by room, seeing who's in the building. Eventually, we heard them upstairs, and Mr. Mosier, the teacher who was the room next door to us, We saw some lasers come through the window. And so we were like, okay, we need to let them know we're here because the doors were locked. He sent one kid that way. He said, hey, go wave. I remember him saying waving, and they just started screaming, get out here, get out now. And so he's like, I have to go. And he got pulled out. Eventually they knew we were in there by checking, him and his story, and we got pulled out of the room. At that time, it was, as we're coming out, I remember getting patted down probably, I want to say it was like 3 times. I'm 15, getting patted down, what's going on, really? Got patted down, they shoved us down the main corridor first, we got out, each math, science, all of them were U-shaped, and the main corridor, we got shoved down to the main hallway, and then we went through the social studies out to the front of the school. Anyone who's seen Columbine, you've seen the buses, you've seen the front of the school. Out front there was a bus through the neighborhood, backing up. There was a bus waiting for us. We crossed the road. There is a picket hole. They took out a bunch of pickets on a fence of a person's house in Leawood. It was the neighborhood right across from us. And we got into a bus. And everyone's like, what's going on? We don't know still. All of us as kids, we don't know what's going on. We just knew something happened. And we just heard it's the Trenchcoat Mafia. And we're like, who's the Trenchcoat Mafia? We didn't, we don't know. So you didn't trying to put 2 and 2 together. We were one of the last classes to leave the building that was locked in there. We got sent down to Leawood Elementary School. And at Leawood Elementary, we would come out of the bus, they took our name. Who are we? And then we would go into the cafeteria where the stages are. They would announce our name and saying, hey, this is, Justin Savoy. He's one of the survivors. That way the parents who were there could reunite. Several hours before that, they actually shut the stage down. And they announced to the general public, to the parents, to everyone, that was all that survived. My parents were one of the families that were there. And they just knew there's no more. And then they said, hold on, we found another couple classrooms. And that's when I came in. So I got reunited with my parents. Our house lived literally, we weren't in Leawood, we were in Dutch Creek, which was 1 street over. And the entrance of our neighborhood, it was blocked for months. But the night that I got to go home, my grandparents were from Michigan. And they told me, and they told my parents that there was actually kids fleeing over the fence into their backyard and banging on the door, screaming for help, saying that there was a school shooting happening. And so my grandparents who, they're no longer here, of course, brought them in, locked the house, tried to keep them safe. But that night, my brother who was living with us, I remember watching the news, we're going to bed that night, and another bomb went off. And so we're all going, okay, what was that? We thought my brother fell out of bed. And it wasn't. It was the SWAT team. They're going through the school, starting any of the pipe bombs that weren't going off, setting them off, trying to clear the school and everything that night. But yeah, vividly, kids ran out of the school. They went to the local library. They were any which way you could through it.
When did you realize the full extent of what had happened? Because you were one of the last classrooms that came in. They announced your name. You had no way of knowing the impact of what had happened. When was the moment that you realized? It was that night, and you started finding out, through the grapevine, okay, so-and-so's still not found. We started kind of going through, and with that, we started, as students, people are calling each other, hey, so-and-so got shot. And then with the days leading, we started hearing more names, as they identified the victims and everything. And, computer I worked with, Corey at the golf course. Daniel Rohrbaugh, he was in my class. There was several of them that it hits home, that they're gone. And so young, I imagine that was one of the first times you've experienced loss. It was the first time I've experienced mentally for myself as a 15-year-old. I've never gone to a funeral, never gone to anything. And going through a massive shooting was huge, Yeah. Years after that, friends who could not handle what they went through, they ended up committing suicide. So it's huge.
it's hard. I mean, we were at a school for a while, and that's where Chatfield High School, which was the nearest high school for Jefferson County, we actually went to there to finish out our year. So we all had to drive over there. Chatfield would go to school in the morning, we went to school in the afternoon. And so we went there, and it was really at that point, bless the teachers, how do you even take a classroom and try to say, okay, hey, let's do studies now? It wasn't. It was literally like, hey, let's just come together and be in the class together.
I admire your courage to come talk about it and be open, and I feel like you doing that is paving the way for others to do that as well.
They need to. Like I told you when you reached out the first time, I'm open. I want to be open about it because hiding isn't going to help solve as a parent, as anything. I mean, I know my good friend Jennifer, like I said before, she was a freshman, her and I are great friends, and she went through her divorce recently, and she goes, my therapist kind of painted back to, I didn't know if I truly processed Columbine. I don't know if I truly went through it mentally. I know I didn't. Mentally, I had a neighbor who was a therapist, and I talked to her a couple times, and that was really it. I was, okay, I'm there. What else am I supposed to do? The local church kind of put groups together, and a lot of kids kind of gathered there, which is huge. I mean, afterwards.
What are some things that you would like to see schools do or the community do, given the landscape of today's world?
That's a loaded question. I think a lot of it, to me, Paresa, is schools, and I shouldn't say just schools, school districts. There's this magical budget that it's like, we've reached it. Sorry, we can't do more than that. Or as we're building a new school, or whatever that case is. I think there's always something. If it's an SRO, to me, one SRO is not enough. I think there should be two in a school. One that's on one side, one that's on the other side. They're there for a reason. But if we as a society keep cutting our taxes and fight our taxes, okay, that goes against fire, that goes against schools, that goes against police departments, it goes against everything. And so if we're cutting that, or we can't fund that piece, and schools actually help fund it as well, and they don't have that money, then we're not protecting our own. We're not protecting your son, your daughter, my boys, or anyone else out there, or loved ones. So I think, to me, the school districts need to take a deeper look at that part. Education is always important, but safety, we all drop our kids off going, okay, I love you, and we're saying a prayer. We don't know.
That's the realest thing I've ever heard. Is you dropping them off, and I literally say a prayer. It's very heavy. It's hard to think about. I agree with you that it brings a different perspective, right? Because we're always like, oh, I want to cut taxes. I don't want to pay so much in taxes. But our taxes cover a lot of this conversation for public schools.
They do. They cover a good chunk, but yet also some school districts, believe it or not, have to also pay too. It's just not the school, it's not just taxes. It's just not all that. So, I think with SOS, building the funds, if it's a school district, we have multi-million-dollar schools out there. And we have little PAWS school districts like you and I've talked about. Some are going to get catered better than others. I look at Denver schools versus Douglas County schools versus, Park County. Each school district's a little bit different. I think as it comes more at state level, and it needs to push down to how do we protect more? How do we help the mental stability of kids, the parents evolve around it?
I think you bring up an important point too. There are billions of dollars of taxpayer money that's out there, depending on the district, depending on the area. For instance, here in Douglas County, we recently passed 5A or 5B, and that's covering a lot of the security enhancements for public schools and some charter schools. There is not funding support for private schools, and it depends on the charter. It's kind of convoluted. I don't know exactly how charter schools work as far as private funding and public funding, but I can tell you that SOS's role has very much become private schools and charter schools. We've supported a couple public schools that are more in the city, right, who don't have a 5A, 5B type of bond or bill that's been passed. If they don't have the funding, then they still need the support too. I think it's just so important to stress that every school is so different, and public schools, that is one big piece of this is, as times change, our questions need to change as parents of how is this school addressing this? Are we doing everything that we can, or are we shying away from it and not talking about it? I'll tell you firsthand, there's some schools that won't have the dialogue. Like, I don't know if it's because the principals are nervous to talk about it. Maybe they're worried about liability or they're worried about, but I encourage anybody who's in a leadership role in our schools to rise above that and lean into the faith, not the fear of it. Because when we talk about it, we look at what are the actual causes and the solutions that we can roll out together. And it's not going to be just you. It's going to be your leadership. It's going to be the parents of the students. It's going to be everybody wants to come together and rise above what's happening so that we can change the narrative. We don't want these stories.
It needs to end, and I want to say I wish it would end. I hope that it ends, but my reality light always says something's always going to be there, and you know that too. And I think it's how do we rise above it? How do we try to make a difference and fight against?
Yeah, I hear you. I so appreciate you. Thank you for this conversation, Justin.
You're welcome.
If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me Facebook, Instagram, email. Anything. So
we can drop your handles in.
You can drop my handles in there. I'm, as I put it, I get around. In my job, I drive a lot. I'm in the public eye a lot.
I love that. Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate it so much. And thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Remember this as you go about your day today. The ideas that are on your heart for a reason. Do not ignore them. Tune into them. Tap in, lean in, understand them, and pursue them. If not you, then who? If this episode was helpful to you in any way, please like, share, comment, subscribe. It does wonders for our efforts, and it helps us to continue our mission of inspiring entrepreneurs and giving them the resources and the perspective we all need to take it to the next level. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paresa Noble, and we'll catch you next time.